Hi, everybody. Mike Amundsen here, author of Design and Build Great Web APIs. Due to a scheduling conflict, I'm not going to be able to join you live today, so I pre-taped my talk, Testing Your APIs with Postman and Newman. If you're involved in any aspect of the API design, program, build, release, maintain, API testing is a critical element, and hopefully this talk will give you some ideas on how you can improve and expand your API testing program with these tools. I'm sorry I can't be there. I hope I get to see you sometime soon online or maybe even in real life someday at some conference near you. Thanks again, and I hope you enjoy this presentation. Hi, this is Mike Amundsen, and I'm here to talk to you about testing your APIs with Postman and Newman. Testing is an important part of the API stack, so let's focus on that for a little bit. First of all, this is me. This is how you find me on LinkedIn and Twitter and GitHub and YouTube. I have a YouTube channel, so if you like what you're seeing here, there's more in all those places. I would love to connect with you and find out what you're doing. The material I'm going to be talking about today is from a book that I'm completing called Design and Build Great Web APIs from Pragmatic Publishing. So if you like what you're seeing here, you want to check that out. There'll be more there. So here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about goals of testing. What is the idea behind testing and why are we doing it? We're going to talk about things called SRTs, simple request tests, which is just a way to kind of probe to make sure that things are working fine. We're going to talk about testing with the Postman UI and the Chai assertion library. I'll talk to you about how I use that. Then I want to move to a CLI, a command line interface for Postman called Newman, and show you how I wrap that up to get my own CI/CD service cooking. So that's what we're going to focus on: goals, SRTs, Postman, and Newman. So let's talk about the goals a little bit. Goals are really important. Why are we doing API tests? It turns out that doing tests for APIs is not the same as testing for code. So it's really important to keep this in mind. Essentially, what we're doing is we're testing the interface. That's all we can test. We can't really test the code behind it. We don't know what services are behind that API. We just know how that API behaves. So it's important for us to focus on the outside in kind of approach and see what it is that we're actually working on. Second, we want to at least validate inputs and outputs. Is the URL valid? Does it actually respond to the method we're using? Can we send the proper inputs and get the proper outputs back? That's really that sort of first level probe kind of testing. It's not really detailed testing, but at least it gets us to the point where we're getting started. You can think of it sort of as unit testing for APIs kind of approach. But what we really want to do is we want to confirm the behavior of the API. We want to confirm that it actually does the things it's supposed to do. And that really comes up in two areas. So I call them happy path tests, or the 200 tests. If I send this information in, I should get a 200 OK and the filter back. Or if I try to write a new record with the proper inputs, I should get a 200K OK and a new record. But I also need to test the sad path, or the ones where I expect to get a 400. I send an invalid filter value, or if I try to write a record that's a duplicate, or if I try to write a record that's got improper inputs or doesn't have the required fields, I should get that 400 back. So when I do my tests, I'm going to have both happy path and sad path tests. That's really, really important. So let's see how we can put this together. And let's focus on these ideas called simple request tests, or SRTs. This is sort of my minimal element. I usually run these SRTs while I'm actually doing the build and before I've done an extensive behavior test setup. So SRTs are a great way to just validate endpoints. Sometimes I use SRTs on somebody else's APIs just so that I can get that started. So I want to confirm the URL and confirm that it actually responds. And I want to validate that I get 200 OK in the data I'm looking for. I don't always, especially if it's somebody else's APIs, I'm not trying to test the sad path so much as the happy. But if I'm doing it on my own APIs, which I often do, then I'll test both the happy path and the sad path. I use curl for this. You could use curl or wget or any other sort of simple HTTP library to get this job done, and you'll be fine. Really, what you want to do is collect up that output. I usually write it to a text file, and I often check it into the project. It's part of my CI/CD level. So as I'm writing code, I run these SRTs, change the code, run the SRTs, and do this over and over and over again. And really all I'm doing is eyeballing the results at this point. Did I get a 200? Did I get a 400? Did I get the fields I was looking for? When I write the Postman test, the detailed test, then I'll actually do much more detailed checking and questioning of the shape and the actual values in the response. But here, I just want to make sure that it works out okay. So validating the input using curl or some other tool and making sure that it actually returns what it wants. Let's take a look at an example of SRTs in action. Okay, so we want to test out this idea of SRTs, right? So let me just show you what I've got here in my project. So I'm actually in a Node project right now. So this is my test space, and you'll see some reference here to Postman and Newman. We'll talk about those later. We're going to focus on this SRT and SRT list. Let me just give you a quick view of what those SRTs look like. So this is my list of requests. This should look pretty familiar if you've done curl or wget or anything else like that. This is just a series. This is my series of happy and sad path tests. So I just write these probes. So in this example, I'm trying to see if there's actually, I can create a record. This one should be invalid. This one will be okay. This one would be a duplicate, so on and so forth. So this is really just my series of tests. So let me get out of here, clear this up, and then we'll just do a run. I'll show you what this run looks like, and then I'll show you uh, what the actual, oh, okay, here we go. Tests. There we go. And then I'll show you what the output looks like. So the first thing it does is it actually fires up my API. I'm running Node, so it fires it up locally and then runs through all the tests. So you can actually see here, I'm going to go up to the early part here. So you see all this output. So it starts with my simple happy path, elements, lists, and filters, and post, and put, and patch, and delete. And then it starts my sad path elements, missing an email. That one should work. This one is a duplicate. This one ignores the field. This hat size field's not valid in my schema. And then this one actually tries to get a record that's not there and then cleans up after it's done. So it's a pretty straightforward system. Now, it's a bit fiddly because I can't really read that easily. So one of the things I can do is, given a list, I can do an output file as well. So now I'll just run the same tests, only this time it outputs the main responses to a file. So now I can take a look at that output file. So there's all that same information that I had before, but now it's in a nice handy file that I can check into CI/CD. Let me show you one other thing here, and that is the actual script itself. So let's see here. Let's do this. Color scheme. Let's do it to warning. There we go. It's a little bit easier to read, right? So what this does, remember, it sets up a file, starts my npm run, so it assumes that I've got npm running, and then goes through that file and then reads every line. As long as the line's not a comment or a blank, it actually executes it, whether or not it pipes it or not, based on a file that I supply. So it's a really simple script, and it's very, very powerful. And it gives us this great way to do what we talked about before, this idea of SRT testing. All right, so let's go on to the next step of actually using Postman. Okay, so let's start looking at testing with Postman UI and the Chai.js assertion library. So Postman is a fantastic platform for APIs in general. It was originally built in 2014. It's got design, build, test, all these other things inside it. Now it does require a client-side install. You actually have to have a client app running in order to do that. But it works out great, and it's easy to install on lots of different platforms. I've done it on lots of machines, and it's not a problem at all. Now, the way the tool is built up is it really has this pattern of collections, folders, and requests. Requests are the actual URL and method and arguments that you're going to pass back and forth. Folders are a collection of those requests, and collections are a bunch of folders. So you actually can build up this hierarchy. I usually arrange all my happy path and all my sad path in different folders, and I keep my APIs, like my company API, my person API, my routing API, so on and so forth, in a collection. Sometimes I do the collection slightly different if I have different targets. So if I have a remote target or a local, but I usually handle that in a thing called environment variables. So there are variable sets that I can create. I can create a stand-in for the server address, for example. So environment variables work at the global level and at the collection level. So you have this this ability to kind of adjust your target audience and still keep the same test, which I really like. Another thing I really like about Postman in general is they have a lot of built-in scripts. So if you're used to doing things like assertion libraries and schema validation in JavaScript, well, those libraries are probably already in Postman, so you can keep using them. If you write a lot of Node code and you want to do things like requests and so on and so forth,
those are in there as well. There's more than a dozen client libraries, more than 10 node libraries. It's a really, really rich environment for doing programming, which I think is very, very important. Now, I use the library called chai.js, which is an assertion library. And it's really just a way of actually running tests. It's very BDD style, so it's very outside in, very Dan Northish kind of thing. It has a very fluent interface, so it actually looks almost like I would speak. I expect this object to include this string. I actually can write it out that way. So I really like that as well. It's a little easier to share libraries for that reason. Share that with other people who are not necessarily big type programming. I use the expect collection. There's also a should collection and a standard assert, and it's really just your style as to what you would like. But I'll show you the expect version when I do it. So let's go ahead and build a couple of tests, and I'll show you how this works. I'll show you how the UI works and how you can build up and get test results.
All right, so let's talk about just using Postman UI to do my testing. So what Postman runs on, as I said before, is this idea of collections and requests. And so what I'm going to do is add a new request. It's pretty easy. I go to my collection. I'm just going to say I want to add a new test and then add it to the collection, and it puts it right in the group, and then I can start building. And all I really need to do to build is actually just add a URL to start and just test that out. So I actually have one here where I added the URL. That's all it's added. So it's just simply a probe to the root of an API. So we can see that we get our results back. Now we know this works. Now I can start writing tests. So I can actually just write a series of tests by opening up this test window here and editing the test. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go back to one I've already prepared for you, so you don't need to see me type. So this is how I write my tests. These tests actually come in groups. I test protocol details, structure details, and value details, and we'll talk about each of those. So here's my Postman test. Test really is a two-step process. I give a string and then a function. So I want to test if the return is 200, and then I write a function to do that. And I can use that chai.js library to do expect. So it's postman.expect the response code to equal 200. Nice, fluent language. I like that a lot. Now, I also want to test the header, make sure I'm getting application JSON back. So I pull the header, a response header, and then I expect that header to include the string application JSON. Now, notice I'm saying include and not equals. There might be some additional information in that string, but as long as that content type header says application JSON in it, I know I'm going to be good. So that's protocol level. But then I also want to test the structure of the response I get back. So I grab the response body, which should be JSON, and then I make sure it actually contains a valid home object. This home root should have this home object. The object should be an array, and then it should be that array of anonymous objects that contain ID, name, rel, and href each. So these are my link objects. So you can say I wrote a script here that said I expect the body home to be an array. And then for each of the elements of that array, then I expect the item to have the property ID, property name, property rel, property href. This is how I test the structure of my API. Then finally, I want to test the values. So I know there's supposed to be at least one item in that collection called list. So let me go get that item, find the one where the ID equals list. Then, assuming I get that, I can test other expectations, like that item the ID should be including list, the home name should include company, and the rel should include both the words company and collection. So I'm testing the value as well. So protocol structure value is a key way to organize your tests. So if I just run this right now and see what results I get back, hopefully they should all pass. So let's go take a look and see what my results look like. And sure enough, they all pass. 200 content type. It's a valid home object, and it's set to list, company, and collection. Very cool. Now that's my happy path, right? I can also do sad path testing as well with the Postman library. So let's take a look at what sad path testing looks like. Right now, I'm going to try to create a record that doesn't have the required fields. So I should get a status, a protocol status of 400, and I should get a problem JSON message back. Not just application JSON, but one specifically structured to tell me what the problem was. And this is an RFC type.
So you can look up, if you look up problem JSON, you'll find it in the RFC. So I get the response, I get the body, and now I'm taking a look. Is it a valid error object with all the right properties that I expect? And if it is, can I actually find the values that it should have? The error type, the error status, and the error details should say missing company, and so on and so forth. So this is how I can test for my SAD path. So again, let's do the same thing. Let's take a run at this and see what the results are. And sure enough, I pass all my tests. So it's a 400. I got the problem JSON back. It's a valid error object that includes error 400 and missing company name and status. So that's how I can do UI testing with Postman UI. And I can also run these as a collection as well. So if I go back over here and I just click on this and say run, it's going to bring up a test runner for me. So it can run the whole collection. So I can build up a whole series of tests, tests for various responses, tests for various items, objects, URLs. And then I just press run company, and I'm going to get all the results back from all those elements. And if I'm lucky, I get all passing tests. All right, so that's how I'm going to do that with Postman. Let's move on now to talk about how we can do this at a command line level and not just at the UI level. All right, so finally, how do we start to automate this whole process? I love the Postman UI, but I have a lot of CI/CD pipeline or build tools or processes or scripting that I need to do. And that's where this idea of a command line interface comes in handy in a tool called Newman. So you can automate your testing this way. You can automate your testing with Newman CLI. It was built around 2016. It's really simple. It's an NPM package, so it's simple to install. Just install. I install it globally, install/g Newman. And then I also need to install this other piece that we'll talk about a little bit later. But once you install it, it's Newman, run, and the name of the collection. And I'll show you how to get the name of the collection and how you can take a look at that as well. It's just really an ID number. And it's basically it's a fantastic way to put things together. So I can actually use the Postman API to pull test collections and environment variables down to my own machine. There's a great API, and now I'll need an API key, but it's pretty simple. And then I just use curl with that API key, and I can do lots of things like manage my collections, pull them down, store them locally, and stuff like that. So Newman utility actually, plus the API, lets me automate this entire process. I can pull the proper collection and the proper environment, and then I can run the tool, and then I can actually generate a really cool report and put it all together in a single script. So I have this thing called test run, which I'll show you here in just a bit, that lets me do all that information, pull it together, run the tests, and then I'll be all set. Now the tests are simple text outputs, so it's not great, but it's very effective. It's very, very good. But if you want something really more special, there's a great add-on tool called a reporter tool. So the whole Newman family has these reporter tools, and there's one called HTML Extra, which I like really, really well. So pull that down with npm, and then you just need to add that -r for report, -r and the name of HTML Extra, and you get a great output report, which we'll take a look at as well. So automation is pretty simple. Get the Newman client, use the API to pull the collections and environments you need, run that, and if you want to, have this extra HTML report. So let's actually take a look and see how that would look in command line exactly. All right, so let's see how this all works in a command line type experience. So for starters, let's just do this here. This is our Postman section, right? So I've got a little run script, got a little configuration file, and then I've got this environment variable, which actually holds my API key. So we're not going to worry too much about that. Basically, what I want to do is I actually want to run that same series of tests that I was running before in the UI, but I want to do it at the command line level. And I can do that with a cool tool called Newman. So Newman is pretty handy. So what I'm actually going to do here is just show you what I've got built here. I'm just going to show you, and we'll do the same thing. Color scheme, morning. So all I really need to do is have this utility called Newman installed along with this HTML reporter. We'll look at it a second, and a little bit of curl, because I'll use curl to actually do the API work. So I check out my config, make sure everything is there,
And once that's done, I take this first step. So this step right here is where I actually call the API to pull in the collection and the environment that I need from Postman. So I'm actually calling up to Postman server, pulling that information down. These are two JSON files, pulling that information down and storing them on my local drive. And then once I do that, then I can run the test. So this is it. Newman run the collection and the environment and whether or not I'm doing outputs. This bail gives me some feedback information on scripting so I can get exit codes 1 or 0. So I can either run it straight or I can actually do a pipe. So it's pretty simple. All I really need to do is run this routine, check to see if tests pass or fail. This will come in handy because I can actually use this as part of a CI/CD experience. So use the API to pull the collection and the environment variables I need, and then use the Newman utility to actually use that data to actually run the tests. So it's pretty straightforward. So I'll show you what that looks like right here. So now what I'm going to do is do the test run, and I'm going to aim it at a local server. I can aim it at a local or a remote server, but I'm just going to aim it at a local server here. So we're just going to run this test, and it's actually going to run through all those tests and then save them to disk. So it actually saves them to an output file for me. So this is my output. So remember, we got happy path and sad path tests, right? So here's my set of happy path tests. I do a get, list, filter, all those other things. And I can also do my sad path testing too, right? So I can read something that's not there, check to see if something has a missing email, and I get all of that information for me. That's what I want. And then what happens is I get a nice report at the end that's spooled out to disk. How many requests, how many scripts, how many pre-requests, because that's where my libraries are, and then the total number of assertions. So I actually just write this out to the file, and then I can use this in the future. So that's essentially the work that I do. Now, let me just show you what the configuration looks like, just so you get an idea behind it. So it's pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. I've got a title, and then this is the collection ID and the environment IDs that I have. I don't have a remote setup for this particular set of tests, but I could use them if I want. And then I can say, this is how you write them out. You can write out the environment, the collection, and the output set. So now what I've done is I've gone through all this experience building the Postman UI tests. I can then pull them and add them into my CI/CD collections. So this becomes the way that I actually can run a full-on test, deploy, and then retest remotely every single time.
Okay, so we've taken a look at a couple of different things. First of all, we talked about the idea of the goals of testing. You're really working on an outside-in approach. I can't really concern myself with the code behind the API. I need to focus on the API and focus on its behavior. How is it behaving? What does it allow me to do? What does it prevent me from doing? And I want to focus on that happy and sad path version of testing, right? I need to test for 400 in the right place, as well as test for 200 in the right place. So I talked about these SRTs and the value of just like poking the endpoints, focus on the URL and the method and check out the body. It's just a curl or a wget kind of tool to do it. And I just want to make sure that everything is working properly. It's not really testing yet, but it's enough for me while I'm building to get something super quick and get some great feedback on. Now, once it's time to really build up my test libraries, then I want to use Postman, and I use the chai.js library. So I want to create a collection. I want to create file folders and requests. I can use that assertion for that BDD style expect outside in kind of approach. And I can build up a set of reliable test modules and share those across using environment variables and things like that. And be sure, again, make sure you're doing both happy and sad path testing as you're doing this. And finally, once I know I've got my APIs tested well and running in the Postman UI, I can actually use the Newman command line interface to start automating my test processing as well. So I can install Newman. I can run this little tool called Test Run, which I'll share with you here at the end. And then I can actually even add a custom HTML report if I want to, this HTML reporter tool. So now this becomes part of my pipeline series. I can actually build, test, and if it passes, deploy, and if it passes, test remotely to make sure that that worked as well. All through this process with Postman. So that's really all there is really to it. Goals, SRTs, Postman UI, automating with the client. So there are lots of resources I talked about in here, so I'll make sure I share all of those with you. You'll get these slides. You can check this out. You can find out more about this whole testing process and lots of the other API stuff in the book. We talked about SRTs, where you can get Postman and all these other things. So all these utilities, everything that I showed you, will be downloadable as well. So hopefully that's helped. Add to the stack. Remember, testing is a key part of everything. So test your APIs with Postman and Newman. And I hope to talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.